how can we simplify this? How do we make it easier to approach? A lot of people think Figma is too difficult actually with design system stuff. Can we make something that's like as powerful, but a little bit easier to get into? We are a design tool, like first and foremost, like I want everything to speak designer. I don't want you to have to learn something new to use paper. I do think that there's a phase of like problem space expansion where I'm exploring like what's possible, like what are my competitors doing? What should I do? You have to do that or you'll get out of touch with what people actually need. But when you're making a product, like...
Every now and then you get the chance to talk with someone that has a vision for the future, or at least a vision for how tools should function to help us build that future. That's Stephen Haney and the company he's building, Paper. They're doing things in a unique way that feels like just the right approach at just the right time. When everyone else is chasing prompt design and generative AI, Paper is chasing a better way for people to explore ideas in a single canvas and to stay in flow. When I first heard of Paper, I thought it was going to be a trendy design tool and then disappear. Surely no one is going to dethrone Figma, right? Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. The more time that I've spent with Stephen and with Paper, the more I realized that they're building a tool to help designers push their craft further by focusing on doing the fundamentals better than anyone. You're watching Today in Design. Stephen, thanks for being here for Today in Design, man. You were on Release Notes previously. We had a great chat. You demoed Paper. It blew our minds, to be honest with you. You're doing things in Paper that even after Config 2025, we're not seeing Figma talk about. So, dude, introduce us to who you are and tell us all about Paper and why now?
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, it's good to see you again. Big fan of the show and the newsletter, of course. So yeah, Paper is something we started about 9 months ago. I often tell the story of like growing up, cracked version of Photoshop, as I'm sure a lot of us had, and like making 3D renders and doing bad post work on top of it. Just kind of like loving that era of design a lot. And it was kind of a messy era where everyone was doing different types of work. There was no established trends, this way pre-designed system. So everything was very pixel-based too, and people doing interesting things. And it feels like right now there's kind of like a resurgence, like an appetite in the community for more of that type of work, more of the creative. We've been using a lot of vector shapes for the past 8 years or so. So like things like shadows and outlines have become very popular. Flat design is very popular for a long time, but it feels like now we're trying to break out. I don't know if you saw the new Airbnb design that just launched today, for instance.
I did.
A lot, obviously some AI in there and like animation and a lot of different things happening that like, you wouldn't have seen that 4 or 5 years ago. And so I think both like professionally and like, big companies, but also small companies, agencies, everyone's trying to find ways to stand out and to look, unique. And so Paper is basically like, our mission is to make tools that support that and help people be successful in their jobs or in their agencies, whatever that means, basically. That's our core mission. And to do that, to serve that, we started with a design tool. It's like a canvas-based design tool.
It's interesting timing to me for a canvas-based design tool when I feel like the modalities in which design happens are quickly changing, right? Like right now we're seeing a lot of the hype being built around prompt and get design.
Yeah.
And then there's that tension of designers and even engineers saying, yeah, but I still prefer to explore on an infinite canvas.
Yeah.
And so now I think as an industry, we're looking at it, we're saying, okay, we like both of these. We like the ability to just talk and get code, but we also want to explore on the infinite canvas, yet nobody's connected the two of those in a meaningful way yet. There's not that magic button, say, this is my canvas, this is what I've explored and created. Now it's code, it's something I can prototype, deploy to production, whatever. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a contrarian bet that we're making a little bit because everyone's going after like V0, Lovable. Figma has their own now, and which I think will be very successful. We're over here making like a canvas where we're spending a lot of time on like the color picker and the gradient tools, and you can argue like, what are you guys doing? Like you're missing the mark, you're missing the trend. But I think that that's like opportunity. Like no one else is actually making sure that we have really substantial, really concrete fundamentals while also looking for like new things we can do. I also think like a bet that we're making is if we have a really great app, an app that you love using, as people figure out AI flows that are actually useful, we can build those too, right? And so we kind of started like Canvas first, really great interaction, really great tools. And as people figure out workflows that are actually helpful for real world design, like we'll implement those, we'll bring them in. We're also working on our own. We're trying to figure out new things too. I'm excited about AI because AI is like fundamentally like you're creating something. When you're talking to an AI or you're like prompting an AI, you're creating something new. And I think that's really cool. And the effort level is not a creation effort level, it's a consumption effort level. And what I mean by that is like, I can scroll TikTok or I can prompt Midjourney and they feel about the same amount of like, chemicals in your brain are firing off. You're having fun. You're kind of like, it's not really like you're trying really hard. And I don't think that's all you should do. That's kind of like, like junk food diet or something. But like, it's really cool that we can create things with less effort and like have it be, because, even if you lock in and your focus mode, you got your tunes playing, you're probably only creating 4 hours a day would be really good. So if we can reduce that and put your 4 hours of focus in where you're the one creating, and now you can create more without that same level of effort on the side, or you can take those ideas that you have and expand them with like, it feels more like taking a break. So you can do a little bit of both. Like, I think that's really interesting and exciting. Yeah. And then we've seen a lot of folks, try to do prompt to finish design. I don't think that's that useful, maybe for prototypes or quick things. Yeah. So it's like, how do you keep the designer in the loop? Because it's the human's vision and like the designer's vision that they're trying to execute on the world that they're building is like something we talk a lot about is like, how do we let people build, visual worlds? The AI should be a tool to like augment that, make it faster. Right. And so that's kind of how our approach toward it. And it's not settled yet. We're still seeing tons of movement. But certainly the prompt to app builder space is very crowded now, especially with the newest Figma launch.
I'm curious, you think about those 4 hours a day where a designer's, heads down creating, right? And so you alluded to, without directly saying, that paper is going to help me get more out of those 4 hours. I'm curious, like, what is it about paper that's going to make those 4 hours more meaningful for me versus a tool like Figma?
Oh man, yeah. So we're doing it in a lot of different ways. Maybe I'll start small and go big. So design tools have locked up for the past 2 or 3 years, and we started to see some movement with config, which I think is good, but there hasn't been a whole lot of progress. Like the fundamentals of design tools have not moved. And I think that's like lack of competition. So like part of our just existing, I think we help maybe benefit the ecosystem a little bit in that way. The way the colors work, especially on the browser and the web, gradient tools, just the fundamentals of design, giving people easier, faster ways to see and think, and they don't have to like translate it to some system. There's been a lot of advancement and the tools haven't really changed at all. If you look at design systems, a lot of what we work with design systems was basically created 6, 7, 8 years ago, and it wasn't like fully figured out yet. And we're kind of stuck with like maybe 2 ways of doing stuff. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to actually simplify the tooling for design systems. I also see a lot of companies are actually, I don't want to say like moving away from design systems, but they're like, we had a moment about 4 or 5 years ago where we thought like design systems is the next thing, it's going to be huge. And it's like, yeah, it's a useful tool, but it's one of many things that we do to create experiences for our users. And I don't think like the tooling hasn't really updated since we've learned what design systems are good for and how to incorporate them into our teams. So we're going to do some work on like, how can we simplify this? How do we make it easier to approach? A lot of people think Figma is too difficult actually with design system stuff. Can we make something that's like as powerful, but a little bit easier to get into? So a lot of stuff like that, where we're basically going after the fundamentals. We also, another thing that we're doing that's a little maybe more splashy is letting you do more roster editing. So, everyone knows this, we're doing shaders, which are like cool textures you can make with your graphics card, animated textures. We're also bringing like more Photoshop editing in, so you can use filters, blurs, things like that. So I kind of want to bring in like 80% of Photoshop, 80% of Illustrator, so you can do more of this stuff in one tool and not have to like bounce around as much. And I actually think that's really important, is that context switching when you're bouncing tools. I was talking about this with Rid, was like the other day, where when you switch tools, you also like go check Twitter, and maybe you like look at your email, and you kind of forget what you were doing, or at least I do. And so I think like staying in one tool to be able to do the whole flow is actually can keep you in that flow longer, which I think is important. So sure. I don't know, all kinds of stuff that we're going after with this one.
I think it's so funny that we're talking about a design tool, yet you're bringing up, but when you command tab from Figma over to Photoshop, you're probably scrolling Twitter. It's such an interesting perspective, I think, on what it is you're building. Stephen, I gotta ask, man, where does that come from?
Honestly, one of our struggles is picking a lane a little bit, because we have a big ambition, and so we want to do a lot, and we're thinking kind of holistically. Actually, this is a great topic. Is no one's ever made a successful design tool who wasn't a designer. You can't be a sales-driven design tool. It doesn't work. We've seen people try and they have exploded and then it hasn't worked. And so I think if you look at like the early days of Figma, amazing, talented, world-class people building that thing, right? And same with Sketch, still to this day. The Photoshop people, the people at Adobe that figured out how Photoshop worked before they had prior art to even look at, like, I don't know how they made it. It's so good. And they're like, honestly, huge inspiration. And so I think, we feel that the people that work at Paper are like, those are kind of our idols and our prior art and the things that we love talking about and discussing and dissecting. So, if you're in our Slack, it's like hundreds of messages about, should we have the default text trimmed to the cap size, or should it be like the web where it's spaced out, and how does this benefit people? Or are they going to be like, is it going to be too unfamiliar? So we just have it in our blood, and this is like what we love to do, and could talk about all day.
Yeah. How big is the Paper team right now?
Super small. So we have 3 full-time employees, including myself. Oftentimes, to make really high quality things, you have a small team. Because if you get a lot of people working, even if they're all very good, if you just draw lines between everyone, your number of lines explodes, exponentially. Having a really small team helps us keep really high talent bar. We do add contractors. We have some contractors on the team that are kind of like permanent contractors that help out. But I think we're going to keep it small for as long as possible. Part of what comes with that is sometimes you have to be patient because things may take longer. But you get to the end and you're like, that's what we set out to make. And that's kind of how that's our values. So we'll be hiring more. We did, we raised some VC money, but we're not on that like traditional VC boom or bust path. We're on a let's make something sustainable and great for users.
So let's talk about actually launching Paper and when that's going to happen. And then we'll kind of move on to some of the other stuff here. But I want to give people the information they're looking for. When can I get my hands on Paper?
Yeah, 100%. I get this question a lot, believe it or not. Right now, we're onboarding people one by one. I do a call with everyone that gets in. And so you'll see people tweeting about Paper, making a design. That means they had a call with me for an hour where I make people share their existing Figma files with me, and I can see, where are they breaking down their workflows, and then they get into Paper. We're getting pretty close to sending out batch invites where it's no longer me onboarding people one by one. But when you're making a product, you have to do that or you'll get out of touch with what people actually need. So that user feedback is great. So we have about 20,000 people signed up for early access now. I would love to be able to let everyone in right now, but honestly, it wouldn't be a good time for anyone because there's things that are just rough edges, the file management page isn't really done yet. And we want to make sure there's a flow where you can get all the way through. We're getting really close though, and we're going to start sending the batches out. This month, we're going to start doing some non-onboarded invites, which will be really great to see. So be patient with us. We're working really hard. Trust me, we're working around the clock on getting this done. I think we're pretty excited. I don't like being closed. I want to get folks in. I want to get feedback, and it's exciting to be close to it.
What's been the defining feedback that you've received so far? I found that anytime you're building something new, you have assumptions about how it works. Sometimes those are validated. People are like, yeah, this is great. Maybe tweak this. But generally the throughput is yeah, we were right. And then sometimes you find that you were way off, but things are still positive.
Yeah.
So, dude, I'm curious, what's been the defining consensus across feedback where you're oh my God, that's it?
Yeah, totally. Great question. I think what we found, and the way I think about building companies and products is your theory testing machine. You have these theories about what users will benefit from, what's valuable, and then you try to test it as fast as you can at a high quality. So what we found through that process is values-wise, our general theory that design tools have stagnated a little bit and that there's a demand for new ways of being more creative, as well as new just improvements to the basics is totally true. People resonate with that 100%. I think the next challenge for us is like I said, kind of picking a lane a little bit, because we've been this we want to be a general purpose design tool. There's ways that pure branding designers like using us already, and there's ways that website designers like using us, and there's ways that product designers like using us, and they're all kind of different worlds. And we kind of have to pick one to start with. And that's kind of the phase that we're at right now. And what we're finding is that people, like I said, people really right now want to create more creative worlds as a way to stand out, with your agency, as a way to stand, for your clients to stand out in their delivered work that you're doing. And I feel that need is a little less served right now with the existing tool set. People are kind of they're tacking together a bunch of different tools to get that done. And so I think that's where we're going to start. And our vision is still very much general purpose design tool. You'll be able to do everything you want to do. in this tool, and this will be the place where you almost like come to assemble things, even if you do use other tools. But I think we're going to start with like, this is your place where you can create a consistent world. You need to create a world for your website, for your brand, for your client. Maybe you take it to another tool after to do something else with it, but this will be the first thing that we're going after. And we'll see. And again, that's like a theory that we're going to test. If we're seeing people come back and they're creating value for themselves and they're returning, then we'll probably go further down that path. And if not, we'll reassess and test another theory. Yeah, it's tough, man, because you can have people that really resonate with your mission, but you also need to solve someone's workflow like 110% before it becomes valuable, right? And so that's kind of what we're going after right now.
It's interesting that you say consistent world about the design tool. I'm curious, what do you think it is about paper that does that better than a different tool?
Can I screen share a little bit? I can show you.
Hell yeah, dude, let's go.
Let's get into it. So again, this is early. We've been building for about 9 months. There's tons. There's normal disclaimer. Small team. We're things left to do, but it's starting to come together a little bit. So I'm just going to share. This is a random file I had open.
Can I ask you a question? Why cowboys? Is it because I shared a cowboy photo earlier and you thought it would be clever to do cowboys?
No, I should have done that. That would have been really good. I didn't come super prepared. This was a testing file. I was building something, and I thought a cowboy on a donkey would be a unique prompt to test the AI. So this is paper. For folks that haven't seen it, it's a 2D canvas. We think this is a great way to do design, interact with things. We're doing image gen, of course. Everyone's kind of has it now. And image gen, I think, is a way that you can quickly iterate on different visions. And one of the things we're doing now that we're working on shipping this week is actually saved styles, consistent styles. I think it's so important that once you can like do a mood board and then select it all and be like, generate style from this mood board, and then use it to prompt new images. We're spending a lot of time to make sure that works really well. You may have also noticed this is a little animated, and maybe I'll turn up the speed so you can see it, opacity a little bit. And what I did here was, this is a shader on top of an image that was generated to create like a new asset. It doesn't have to be animated. You can also just use it to create interesting textures. This is the image without any overlay. We want to let people combine a variety of different things to create new assets. If you find the look that you want, we want you to be able to like lock it in and then use that to generate more things too. This is all like in a normal app. Like I have frames, I have auto layout, and I can do my text in here as well. But the idea being, you can create these new assets that are more powerful. We're trying to make this like, you can feel it's like snappy. These are all just normal. Here's an animated mesh gradient. It's just another layer. And because we can do these animations, we can also do like videos on the canvas, GIFs that are actually moving on the canvas. And so we want to be this place of like, you can bring, the other thing we're doing, so Rive embeds, Lottie embeds. If you're doing animation in other tools, we're going to try to do jitter. I haven't tried yet, so I don't know the details. But you can bring these into a place of assembly. And so if you're trying to, like, people try to do that with Figma today, but it can't live embed these different things, right? And so we want this dynamic canvas where you can bring in your dynamic elements to like hand off a vision, to assemble it into something. I think there's a lot of workflows yet to be discovered.
So how would that work though? So if I did a Rive embed, for example, like that's pretty complex, right? So how am I using that embed alongside the rest of this? Is it purely just as like, hey, let me put this artifact with the rest of these? Or are you thinking that because this canvas is code that I can transform it?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't talk about this a lot because I think we are a design tool. Like first and foremost, like I want everything to speak designer. I don't want you to have to learn something new to use paper. It is a design tool. It happens to use code under the hood as its rendering engine. So we're not, these are actually React components, and you don't need to know about that. You don't need to know what that is or means really. But what it does is it lets us bring any React component onto the canvas. So this one right here, this little shader, for instance, this is straight off of NPM. And again, you don't need to know what that means. It just means that it's a piece of code that we're rendering live, and it just feels like another layer. And you can mirror, resize it, all the things you can put inside a frame. What's cool is like when you're done, you can copy it out as code again. So we can put a Rive player right here on the canvas as a layer. These over here, if you're Cody, these are props. They just map one-to-one with props that control the component. And again, you don't actually need to like know what that means. You can just grab them and play with them. And then when you're done, you can get it back out too. And so actually we'll try this. Let's see. So I'm going to copy this as React. Here's the code that I just copied. This code is like literally the exact same thing that's rendering the shader. And so when you go put it somewhere else or you hand it off to a developer, there's no like recreation that needs to happen. They just literally use the asset that you made. So for instance, let's see what happens if we pop over to Framer for a second. And I don't use Framer that often, but I think we will be able to create a new code component. Oh, this one looks exactly the same. Let me do a different one real quick.
You accidentally showed us that it works before showing us that it works, which is I'm cool with that.
It's proof that it works. If this doesn't work, you saw that it at least at one point did work. Let's customize it a little bit. Yeah, exactly. I love this shader because it's you can do like really cool patterns.
It's very lava lamp.
So okay, we take our lava lamp, go back over to Framer, sign back in, and then in our shader asset, I'll just paste this code that we just generated, and we should refresh. There it is. There's our lava lamp. And this is like, I don't know if you noticed, but this is the exact same frame that we paused it on. So it's like your design that you made, whatever your settings were, it's very portable, and you can bring it to Framer, you can bring it to developer to put into any kind of code tool. So we're looking for ways to like all of these things, like bring them in, get them out in a design tool. It feels like a design tool. It doesn't feel like a code tool.
Stephen, based off of this example, if we can, I want to drag you into the depths of the conversation about the way design and basically the entire stack of product creation is being compressed, right? Like we went from the stack to where we design in vector objects to, making sure that our PM's got everything and we're checking it off. And then that's going to go to a VP of product, which is going to talk to a VP of engineering. And then we're going to assign capacity. And you know how that chain of events unfolds. Now, what we're seeing, starting at like what we'd consider to be the tip of the spear, is that really small teams, like a paper-sized team, can do really powerful things with AI, right? Yeah. And so we're seeing the old conversation of designers, do you need to code, has changed. We're like, you just need to learn how to like write English really clearly. When you're showing me the canvas, and I know me, because I'm a little nerdy, right? I love knowing that everything I'm looking at is React and that I can copy that React code and I can manipulate it. But I guess my question, Stephen, is like, it doesn't feel like it's that far off in which the modality in which I interact with code has become so user-friendly that I don't even need to think about the fact that it's React. I just need to think about the fact that I can right-click that, and then in the menu I can say send to Bolt, or send to Cursor, or send to Framer, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
How are you guys thinking about the way that you're exporting those things, using those new kind of modalities or integrations, if you want to call them that, instead of worrying about the nuances of like, designers, don't worry that this is React?
If you look at what Figma did to SVGs, it's interesting. SVGs were around before Figma. We used them. But for some reason, Figma made SVGs this like thing that you could very quickly work on and made it super portable. And suddenly everyone's using SVGs everywhere. To the point where like sometimes I'm doing user interviews and people ask me if they can export their shader as an SVG. And I'm like, sorry, no, it doesn't work like that. They're like different things.
Doesn't work that way.
Fundamentally, I wish. But what's happened is people have gotten trained that SVGs are this like portable format for my assets. In the same way now, you start to look at React, Tailwind is like super portable form of styling. How can we make that more portable? And how can we make that a format of design that can be passed around as easily as you can SVGs? There's constraints with that. There's problems we need to like overcome still to make that possible. But like what's cool about that is you can, one, it's the actual browser rendering technology. So all of your, whatever styles you dialed in are stuck to it. Things engineers always miss are like letter spacing, CSS called line height, things like that. And the padding is like a couple pixels off. If that's actually encoded in the asset that you hand off, there's no like, the engineer can't miss it. There's no copy and paste of individual properties. You can still do that if you want to, but you can actually hand off these finished assets that are going to display exactly like they look in the design tool. Also then to an LLM, LLMs are really good at React and really good at Tailwind. And they're kind of like the language of LLMs for coding in a way. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely think that was a big part of us when we were making that decision of like, it's not easy to make a canvas that uses React and feels really good to use. There's a huge amount of engineering effort that we've put into that. And the speed and the multiplayer, the performance, it feels like as good as Figma or Sketch. We did that because now our data format is it's like the native language of LLMs. LLMs can generate with it. We can export it. And they can use it really easily. Or if you're using things like Framer, it can go to Framer very easily. That portability, man, it's so important. I actually think it's like one of the core bets that we're making is that's really important. You can see we haven't started with a tremendous amount of AI features. And again, that's because we wanted to get the fundamentals in place. We can tack AI workflows on top of it, as well as non-AI workflows too. So if you're Tailwind, you're just so happy because I know those guys. I love those guys because like nothing's going to displace it now because it's so universal. It's so portable. LLMs are so good at it. There's no like dependencies that you're installing or things that you can get stuck on. So I think increasingly Tailwind and React are just going to be these defaults that they're going to get even more locked in over time, I think. Making a design tool that speaks that while also speaking like the interface speaks designer, that's kind of what, a big goal. It solves a bunch of handoff problems as well. If you're handing these things off, there's less work for your engineers. They can miss less stuff. You're speaking the same language, less impedance mismatch. So yeah, there's a ton of good stuff that falls out of that, but it's really hard to do.
It's crucial. It's funny too to me that Tailwind is obviously great, but now I wonder what the adoption curve of Tailwind looks like after the vibe coding movement has fully kicked off. But it's the same thing with ShadCN. Earlier we talked about design systems and companies invested all this money in their design systems, and now we're having this massive footprint of software all built on ShadCN as the design system. And, in some ways, people are doing it properly by customizing it a ton and realizing that it's just a scaffold. And it's crazy how much we're converging on everything looking the same almost in a lot of ways. So you're saying that paper is poised to help me with that, right? Like if my LLM is already writing in Tailwind, you're going to help me speak clearly, almost translating. Like, hey, here's what I've got here. I want you to understand it really clearly in terms of the LLM, which is so interesting because a lot of the workflows today, people are trying to either export Figma artboards straight into an LLM and have, 3.7 Sonnet or something interpret it. But it sounds like you're telling me that that's going to be so easy to do with paper because it's already in Tailwind.
Yeah, and you're already in the environment of drag and drop and direct editing. I mean, everyone's dream would just be direct editing. I can prompt if I need to, then I can edit that a little bit, and then I can prompt again, and it just kind of all flows together and no pasting between tools. Like, clearly that sounds good. And if, by the way, it also happens to be React and Tailwind at the end, and you can choose to use that or not. Like, you can ignore that part and just use it as a design, or you can actually take the code out of it. That sounds pretty good, and so I do think that's like what we're going after. And so it wouldn't be, do a design in Figma and paste it into Claude or whatever tool you're using. It would just be like you're in paper, you're designing, and you prompt and you get some more UI. Maybe it's variations. I do think a lot of the tools are going, it's too big of jumps, and we're a little bit more interested in smaller jumps of variations on your existing designs or using your design system for your designs. And then you can edit it, and then you can prompt again based on your edits, and not edit it in terms of like I select an element and then I prompt again. It's like, no, I can do everything I can do in Figma directly to this design. Over time, we'll see like what needs people have if they want to add animations and state. I think there's a lot that folks maybe want to go for. Right now, we're not doing so much the like, I'm going to deploy this. If you're using Lovable, you're probably trying to deploy it. Some people do prototypes and PMs hand them off, things like that. But we're a little more focused on that first half of the build process where you're like exploring, like what do my competitors do? What are 10 different ideas to solve this? Maybe let me get my team in to check it out. We all agree on it. Like we're a little more focused on that because I think that's the true job of design. So it's a big statement. Of designers, everyone gets so focused on the end of design where you hand off something that looks really good. But like the process of how you got there's a lot of work, and it's not all visual and it's not all clicking and dragging rectangles around. It's a lot of thinking and context building. And so I don't think that's going away. That need isn't going away for someone on your team to be doing that work. And so that's something we're focusing on, quite a bit too.
Why do you think you all aren't as interested in the deploy process? And I suppose to clarify my question, I don't necessarily mean that I design something in paper and then you give me the ability to build it. But I'm curious, it seems like there would be a lot of value in me being able to rationalize and iterate on the front end of my code or my project that I created somewhere else inside of paper, assuming the language was compatible, right? And then push updates back into, wherever I'm working on it. Is that not something that you see on the roadmap anytime soon?
It's a great question. I think it's really cool. And I think it's powerful. I think that like one thing that I figured out over time, by the way, I kind of skipped. So we started a design company called Modules about 7 years ago, where we made Radix, which is what powers ShadCN, right? And so we were making these headless component libraries. And what we learned at the time was that like designers and engineers undervalue each other so much. Like engineers think the designer only makes the final result, and then designers think engineers just screw everything up, and that like there should just be a way to like skip them. I don't think fundamentally, like a bet that I'm making is both jobs are valid and good and going to stick around. I do think that there's a phase of like problem space expansion where I'm exploring like what's possible, like what are my competitors doing? What should I do? And then there's this phase of building. And I think that sometimes they're murky and they overlap, but when you're building something, you're actually like narrowing it in, you're defining exact things about it that the user is going to feel and experience. Those are different phases, and I think fundamentally different jobs. And you'll often see like engineers, they'll freak out if you give them more problems. Whereas a designer will be like curious. They'll be like, tell me about your problem. Let me get that mapped out, And I'm saying these are very generalities. So like, obviously there's tons of great engineers that are awesome problem space explorers and vice versa. But, a lot of times that role of engineering is specifying. If this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And LLMs are going to like merge it all together. But I think fundamentally I see those as two different jobs that are like, they're different jobs for a good reason that's going to stick around. And they'll both change with AI, of course, too. But that's why I'm a little less interested in it, because I don't think engineers are going away. I don't think designers are going away. And so it's I'm not making a bet that one is going to disappear anytime soon. And there's lots of companies making that bet too. So if that ends up happening, we'll be well served as an industry anyway. So we're looking at it a little bit differently. It's a little abstract. Did I answer?
It's abstract, but I like where we're going with it, because you're saying that you don't think those things are going away. Earlier today, Microsoft laid off 7,000 employees, saying it's for what benefits the organization, which is code for like AI is doing those jobs now, right? So do you not worry that the compression that we're seeing of the product creation stack is going to affect designers en masse? Because if I'm a designer at a large company, right? Like let's say I'm working at Capital One, for example, or somewhere like that. I'm probably pretty comfortable in a lot of ways. And like I'm working in Figma, I'm having a good time. I'm, coordinating with stakeholders, all those things. And maybe I'm not using AI super heavily in my workflow, or maybe even you're in an enterprise company to where like there's security and like you don't even get to use it that much. So you're not thinking about it. But I would argue that your CEO and especially your CFO are thinking about how can we increase margins by using more AI and having less of a head count.
Yeah.
And the product org is going to be one of those places where people start to sniff around. So you guys aren't worried about that?
So there's been a tremendous explosion in the last 5 to 7 years of like the product org, development, engineering, and product has exploded. EPD. I think that's like a good thing, because there's been a lot of value in building a lot of software and you can create, like, it's almost like the faster you can make software, the more value you can create as a business. And that's why there's been so many hires. I do think like, obviously it's becoming more competitive. I don't only think that's because of AI, to be honest. I think there's some cyclical nature to this. And I think that when any job or any role explodes like engineering has, like you can pull yourself up. I came from like single mom household. We were in low income housing. She bought me a computer when I was 14. That was like the best thing she could have ever done for me, because we didn't have any money. And through teaching myself programming and design, and it was able to like lift yourself up, right? That's been super unique. And I think when those moments happen in history, like everyone's going to flood into it, right? And try to like, this is great, it's amazing. And it's really good. So I think we should like try to continue that, like as much as you can. Like, how do we continue that? AI lets more people like on-ramp into it. So I'm seeing a lot of folks that maybe start with making a lovable, and then it breaks and they have to fix it. I love that. So that's how I learned how to engineer. I was like making a game and there was a scripting and I would break it and then I'd have to fix it. And that's how I got into the industry. So I think looking at those on-ramps and then turning them into more sustainable things, because I do think that like there's an apocalypse scenario where AI does everyone's jobs, and I don't know what happens then, but I can't operate that way. I have to operate in a way that's like,
Yeah. I'm going to have a lot more time to fish. I know that. So we'll see.
Hopefully the AIs let us fish. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But, so I kind of like set that aside. I mean, maybe that'll come to pass. I don't know. But in a world where humans are still the ones that are commanding the work, then I look at like, how do we onboard more people? And AI is a great tool for that. To your question though, like giant orgs, they make strange decisions. Like Google just laid off a bunch of the Chrome team, which is like crazy to me. Like like Adam Argo is like such a great. Is a crazy. And I think that when you're a giant org, these decisions, who knows what they come from. So anyway, my point being, like, if you're working at Capital One or wherever and you're worried, I do think things are going to become more competitive for the next few years. And then I think as things get figured out, we might see another upswing. But what you should do is you do need to upskill for sure, just to be competitive, to stand out. And that's part of what we're trying to do with Paper, is like give you tools to work faster, to stand out against your competition. It doesn't have to be learn to code though. I think that like people that truly understand users, that truly understand the business context, that help like drive decisions are incredibly valuable. If you're like elevating the level of conversations that are happening on your team, that's incredibly valuable. It's a thing that I look at as someone that hires folks, is like, when someone comes in, do our conversations get better or do they get worse? And like, obviously there's like an onboarding period, but if you can be the kind of person that's making your conversations better, like it's so valuable. And your hard skills, and if an AI is taking some of your hard skills, it matters a little bit less. Now, obviously in a big org, it's very disconnected, and so things can happen. But that's what I would recommend for folks. If you don't want to learn to code, if you do want to learn to code, go code, because it's awesome. Be a design engineer. I think that's great too. But if you don't want to learn to code, user empathy, product context, making sure you're a facilitator of decisions within your team, that's a great design job that is needed. So anyway, long answer, but that's how I see things right now.
I'm with you. I think that there is going to be an increase in competitiveness for a lot of things. I do think organizations are going to reduce headcount, but I don't think that's all doom and gloom. I think that if you're curious, which let's go ahead and make the assumption that most designers are very curious, right? Yeah. Now we do have curious designers who are a little like tech phobic, and that's a problem. But if you're a designer, you're probably pretty curious. And right now, it's like there are these little tools that have just fallen out of the sky. And it's like, hey, guess what? All you have to do is tinker with me, and you're going to be able to do something new. And you're going to have some new mode of creative expression or creation. But you just have to take that time to explore. And once you do, think about all the opportunities that that's going to present you, right? Yes. And I think that that's a magical time for us. It's funny because your history goes back. I think you published a book in 2015 on game development in Swift, if I'm not mistaken. So you've been around for a while, but I never would have thought that the first industry that was really going to get smacked by AI was going to be engineers. And it's kind of turning out that it is. And I'm like, well, you know what, designers, you're probably safe for a little bit longer, because you're literally, and I say this all the time, you're getting superpowers right now. We were talking about earlier today, Petter, our head of design at Off Menu, we're doing some artwork around the office, and we're using generative AI to help make that artwork. But then there's still so much manual stuff. There's going into Photoshop and masking and doing gradients and pulling in other images. But he's like, yeah, but I can create this in Korea, and then I can upscale it to 8K in Korea, take it to Photoshop, make a lot of the manipulations I want, export the image back into Korea, and then have it go ahead and re-enhance the image. And it creates all these new little details. And it's like, wow, like we're able to create things that would have taken us forever. And you're just finding these clever little workflows with AI to make this experience better for you. And I think that designers that embrace that, and tools that help us, as you said earlier, create consistent worlds with those workflows, are going to do amazing things.
Yeah, and that's a great example, by the way, of a workflow that is something we're going after like immediately in Paper. So instead of Korea to Photoshop to Korea, it's just in one place, and you can have that continuous flow. I totally agree. I think like lean in. It's a time where you're getting new capabilities. If you're watching, streams and podcasts about design on I don't know what day you launch on Fridays or Saturday. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going to put you in the right place, I think. To like,
Stephen, I'm sorry. Are you telling the people to watch release notes on Tuesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. Central Time?
That's the way to be competitive in today's job market. So, 100%. But no, I mean that the truth is there. Like the curiosity is really important. It's not a time to ignore it or try to like hopefully it won't impact me. I think it's time to lean in, and there's always opportunity and change, and you can be the person that knows how the new things work the fastest. And I know that's hard, but change it does happen, and I think there's like probably likely to be as much good or more good that comes with it, where people can get into the industry actually easier in the long run, and can learn new skills and are able to build new things. An example of this is like in game dev, like one of my hobbies is game dev. And now as an indie game dev, like the ability to create worlds very literally with generative art and code, especially if you're not maintaining the code long term, you can generate a lot of the code. Like you can create your visions so much faster and so much easier, and you don't need like a whole team anymore. And I think that's really cool too. We'll see like in the long run more creation happening. And I think that's like the world's appetite for software has not been satiated. Like it's just like make more things and people will use them. And so I think, if we start to see that run out, maybe I'll worry more. But, in the long run, I think things will go pretty well.
I couldn't agree more, man. I think that's great. And honestly, I think that's a great message to end on. I think we got it there.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah.
So tell us real quick, when are you guys going to start sending out those batches of invites to paper?
Yeah. So basically, as soon as we see folks like returning and using flows that we onboard, that's like our trigger for like, okay, it's working. Cool. Let's get more folks in. So I think we're really close. It's like we'll probably be sending out a couple hundred batches, a couple groups of 100 batches, like next few weeks, I would say is likely to happen. And so when you're doing a startup, everything's so dynamic and changes every day. And, I might have like a bad user session tomorrow and I'm like, no, it'll never work. And so we're pushing through that. Then you have the great user sessions and you're like, gosh, we should just let all 2,000 people, 20,000 people in at once. And that's probably not the right thing either. So very close. Sign up on, it's paper.design if you want to get on the list, and we'll go in order as folks sign up. So if you want to get the invite sooner, get on the list. And then on Twitter, it's @paper if you want to follow along. And that's where we're posting more of the small, like here's a new feature we're working on. Yeah, I'm glad to have you along. And please be patient. Everyone has like I said, small team. We're working really hard to get it out.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, I appreciate it.